Okay, so imagine for a second that you are living thousands of years ago. We're talking way before the written word, definitely before smartphones, and long before the internet. How on earth would you communicate your deepest emotions, or pass down your community's history and spiritual beliefs? Well, the answer actually lies in the exact same human impulses that drive our entertainment today: sound, movement, and imitation.
Welcome back, focused learners. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today. This explainer is a really fascinating deep dive into a remarkably rich chapter of human history, the performing art traditions of India. We're going to explore how early, raw human expression evolved into these highly complex, structured, and honestly, incredibly beautiful classical arts that have survived for literally millennia.
All right, let's dive into this. Here is our agenda for today. First, the roots of expression. Second, the evolution of music. Third, the teacher-disciple tradition. Fourth, theater, the fifth Veda. And finally, the language of dance. So, kicking things off with Section 1, the roots of expression. Now check out this incredible quote. The ancient philosopher Vatsyayana famously describes 64 distinct arts in human life. But here's the truly staggering part. The very first four on his list are vocal music, instrumental music, dance, and theater. I mean, this proves that the performing arts weren't just some afterthought in early Indian civilization. They were the absolute foundational bedrock of society. They were recognized as the primary, most vital ways we express our creative skills and imagination.
So, how exactly do we define this? Basically, performing arts are skills where artistic expression is conveyed directly to an audience, whether that's through the voice, body gestures, or musical instruments. And what's super interesting is that this usually begins as an everyday organic folk practice by common people. Think of rural folk theater traditions like Jatra or Nautamki. Over centuries, as communities laid down strict rules, these everyday practices morphed into highly specialized classical forms. But the core human impulse? That remains exactly the same.
Moving right along to Section 2, the evolution of music. It's really fascinating to see how ancient texts define music. It wasn't just singing, it was this unified blend of melody, drumming, and dance all working together. And we can track this evolution across three main eras. During the ancient period, stretching all the way back to the Indus Valley in Vedic times, music really kicked off with the chanting of Vedic hymns. Back then there were just three basic pitches, or swaras: sharp, grave, and a mix of both. Over time, those three snowballed into the 7 basic notes that actually form the foundation of Indian classical music. Then, moving into the medieval period, Islamic culture brought in these rich Persian influences, which gave rise to absolute legends like Tansen. And finally, in the modern period, music was officially brought into formal education systems as its own distinct academic discipline.
And this next point brilliantly illustrates how meticulously the ancients approached all of this. The pioneer text on performing arts, the Natyasastra, systematically categorized musical instruments into 4 distinct buckets. You have tat for stringed instruments, sushira for wind, avanada for percussion, and gana for solid instruments made of brass or wood. This structural classification is thousands of years old, but it still makes perfect, logical sense today.
Let's look at how this builds during the medieval period, because this is where things get really dynamic. Due to major regional, political, and cultural shifts, especially with the arrival of Islamic traditions, classical music actually split into 2 very distinct streams. Up in the north, east, and west, we see the rise of Hindustani music. This was heavily influenced by Persian culture and was mostly patronized in royal courts. Meanwhile, down in the south, Carnatic music maintained the original undisturbed purity of that ancient classical tradition, keeping its roots firmly planted right within the sanctity of the temples. Okay, on to Section 3, the teacher-disciple tradition. Now, you might be wondering, with a history spanning thousands of years, how on earth did all this complex knowledge survive without being written down? Well, the secret is the Guru-Shishya Parampara, or the teacher-disciple oral tradition. And the structure here was incredibly rigorous. Following an initiation ceremony, a student would literally move into the house of their guru. This was known as the Gurukula system. They'd live there for an astonishing 12 years. The guru taught the disciple everything entirely through oral repetition. There were no textbooks, no cheat sheets. Knowledge was meticulously memorized and passed down. By the 18th century, this intense, lifelong dedication to a specific teaching lineage evolved into what we now call the Gharana system, where music and dance are taught in highly specific, localized styles.
Which brings us to Section 4, Theater, the fifth Veda.
As we pivot from music over to drama, we've got to look at our most primal human instincts. Drama fundamentally stems from our need to imitate. Just think about the childhood game of Gar or playing house. Kids naturally observe adults, they imitate them, and they take on roles. That instinct, that simple, entirely relatable childhood game, is the exact same psychological root that blossoms into the grand, complex tradition of formal theater.
So how did that natural instinct become codified into classical Indian drama? Well, the mythology behind this is just brilliant. The story goes that in ancient times, the vast, profound wisdom of the four Vedas was heavily restricted. It was only accessible to the upper castes, completely excluding women and the lower classes. The gods saw this glaring inequality, so they went to Brahma the creator and basically said, we need a solution. We need a way to bring this wisdom to absolutely everyone.
To solve this massive societal problem, the creator came up with an absolutely ingenious workaround. Brahma tasked sage Parata with creating a fifth Veda, the Natyaveda, or the Veda of theater. And look at how he engineered it. He extracted intellectual wisdom from the Rig Veda, the music from the Samaveda, the action and rituals from the Yajurveda, and the deep emotional representations from the Atharva Veda. By mashing all these together, Parata created a multisensory, highly accessible art form. It was a brilliant way to communicate complex truths, emotions, and life lessons to the entire population, completely regardless of their social class.
Fast forward a bit, and over time, the highly formalized classical Sanskrit drama favored by the royal courts started to decline. This was mostly due to political turmoil and the fact that Sanskrit was fading as an everyday spoken language. But the dramatic instinct didn't just die out, it adapted. The tradition morphed into incredibly powerful, vibrant regional and folk theater. These forms, performed in local languages and dialects, survive the test of time and remain a huge, vital part of Indian cultural expression today.
And finally, Section 5, the language of dance.
Believe it or not, movements in Indian dance have been traced all the way back to cave paintings from 5000 BCE. Much like theater, dance in this context is deeply intertwined with the divine. And this is perfectly embodied by Nataraja, the dancing Shiva. He's revered as the absolute supreme lord of dance. In the traditional worldview, performing a dance isn't just art, it's a divine act. It's meant to be an echo of the cosmic rhythm of the universe itself.
So the real question is how this grand cosmic idea translates down to human performers. Well, Indian dance uses a very strict, structured vocabulary. We're talking specific hand gestures known as mudras, highly calculated eye and head movements, and very dramatic body postures. But equally important is the costume, because that instantly communicates regional identity. Take, for instance, Bihu dancers from Assam. They wear traditional garments like the Mikala Chadar and Dhoti, which instantly ties them to the East. Contrast that with dancers from Rajasthan, who are wrapped in vibrant lehengas and chunaris. The dance remains a structured universal language, but the attire roots it deeply and beautifully in local soil and culture.
This seamless blend of visual storytelling and local tradition perfectly segues into forms like shadow puppet theater. Just look at the spread across all these different states: Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Orissa. While the spoken languages and the specific puppet styles differ in each region, they all share a totally unified purpose. They narrate the great epics like the Ramayana and Mahabharata right alongside their own local myths. These performances are expertly designed to both entertain and educate rural communities, passing down shared values through a completely mesmerizing visual medium.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with something to chew on. We've just seen how these ancient performing arts, the music, theater, dance, and puppetry, were engineered to reflect the habitat, the morals, and the emotions of their people. They were never just distractions. They were a mirror held up to society. So I have to ask you, just as these ancient arts did, how does the media, the movies, the music, and the entertainment you consume today reflect the ethos and emotions of your own community? Think about that the next time you stream a song or watch a film. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and as always, keep learning.